the Instructor Podcast with Terry Cook, talking with leaders, innovators, experts and game changers about what drives them.
Welcome to the Instructor Podcast, where, as always, I am your splendid host, Terry Cook, and I'm delighted to be here, and even more delighted that you have chosen to listen, because this is a show where every week I speak to leaders, experts, innovators, and game changers to look at ways that we can improve your driving school and potentially make you an even more awesome driving instructor. And today is no different, because today we have got two awesome guests that are giving us some wonderful advice on how we can bring potentially better and different and more varied road safety discussions into our car. So first up, we are joined by James Evans, and we're largely talking about the honest truth, but we do touch on some of his other projects as well. But with James, we're talking about potentially why road safety isn't that sexy and what we can do to make it maybe a little bit more appealing, and how we can involve parents and students, and also the different resources available to us. But then in the second half of the show, we are joined by Sophie Bailey, who is the owner and the founder of Fresh Drivers UK, which is all about tyre safety and garage anxiety and that kind of stuff. Real fresh approach, real new and unique approach on road safety. So two excellent guests that we can definitely take a lot from, and hopefully the episode will make you think. But just before we dive into this one, I'm going to give a little plug, because on Thursday, the 3rd of August, I am hosting a webinar. But it's not just a webinar, it's a big webinar. So I'm calling it a meganar. And yes, it is cheesy. And yes, people will complain about that name, but I like it, so I'm sticking with it. Essentially, there'll be 9 very special guest speakers coming in to talk all things driving instructor topics, and they'll each get about 20 minutes. So the event will be 3 to 3.5 hours long, and it will be free for driving instructors. Now, there will be a limited number of places, but it's completely free for you to come and listen to some incredible people share some wonderful knowledge. So make sure you are penciling that into your diary, and make sure you are following me on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, all that kind of stuff, so that you can see more, because throughout June, I'm going to be announcing some of the very special guests that are going to be presenting. So keep your eyes peeled for that. But for now, let's get stuck into the show. So today we are joined by the ever delightful and insightful James Evans. How are we doing, James?
Hey, good morning, Terry. Thanks for having me. Nice to be with you.
No, it's great to have you on. You're someone that I've wanted on for a long time, so it's good to have you on. And I'm going to kick off with the question I like to ask all of my guests to begin with, and that is that the tagline for this show is I speak to leaders, experts, innovators, and game changers. So I'm just wondering which one or ones of those you fall into: leader, expert, innovator, game changer.
Yeah, I mean, if you'd have asked me 6 months ago, I probably would have just said innovator. I think, I'm certainly not an expert in a lot. Leadership, probably not. But I think asking me today, I think we're kind of maybe moving into hopefully the game changer category. So a bit of a transition moment, hopefully.
What would that be in? What would you class that in? What are you innovating? What are you actually having that biggest impact in when it comes to game changing?
So, I mean, traditionally, obviously, my work in road safety has been around, creation of interventions and, campaigns, and, requires sort of innovation and creativity. I think what we're now doing is sort of packaging all of that into something that can be a disruptor, can be a game changer. I think there's a lot of disruption that happens in various markets for the sake of it and for the entertainment of capitalists and people, but actually I think doing it in the road safety space is quite interesting. So yeah, hopefully a game changer, but that's something that history will dictate to me rather than the other way around, I think.
I do like that you said innovator, though, because I think that's the one that the least amount of people stake a claim to. So I'm pleased that someone has stuck a flag in for that one. But you obviously mentioned road safety there, and I wanted to start with this particular question because I'd be keen on your thoughts on this. So whenever I do an episode on road safety, I try and do one every season on this podcast. The listeners, the download numbers tend to drop by in the region of 20 to 30% based on everything else that season. And this is a podcast aimed specifically at driving instructors, which you would assume is an industry interested in road safety. So, why do you think those numbers drop?
I mean, road safety is just not sexy, is it? If ever we don't go to a lot of parties and things, but if ever I'm there with my wife, she's sort of trying. People ask what I do, and I'm explaining we produce VR film, and I'm in the media and publishing. She says, "No, you're not. You're in road safety. Like it's the most withering put down since your mum said stop showing off in front of your friends. It's like not the kind of thing that traditionally, perhaps dynamic people or people." With big ideas want to be associated with. I don't know why that is. I think it's the inclusion of the word safety and the sort of relatively mundane nature of transport. Unless you're an enthusiast, and I've never been involved in an enthusiast segment. There's a lot of amazing enthusiast stuff that goes on in transport, but we've never really fallen into that. But I suppose the other thing is that there might be an element of complacency. I think we've got some of the safest roads in the world, and road safety is still a very big issue. It's a huge cost to the economy. It's a huge human cost and all the associated other costs. But it's the story is pretty good compared to other countries across the world, even very developed countries. So maybe there's a sort of an apathy towards the need for it that there isn't in other areas of health and well-being.
Yeah. I think that runs across everything, doesn't it? Not just instructors, because I do other podcasts for like learners and stuff like that. And again, if the title says road safety, the numbers aren't as good as if the title says 3 ways to pass your driving test.
Yes,
and
yeah,
really adverse to clickbait. I don't mind with spicing up titles. So I've already got my title for this episode, which is road safety isn't sexy. I'm not adverse to spicing up stuff, but I'm really adverse to clickbait. But I just want, do you think that potentially that could be something that attracts more people? Or do you think that if you use some sort of clickbait method to draw people in, they'd come, see what you're actually talking about, and then disappear anyway?
Yeah, it's an interesting one when you talk about clickbait in education. I remember reading a white paper some time ago all about rewriting email subject lines for better open rates, and actually that was quite transformative for me. It was things like generating self-interest, making something time limited, intrigue, and actually there's a lot to that. I think you're right. The way the media use clickbait and stuff is it from a news telling point of view it isn't always that helpful. But from a road safety perspective, I think educators want to tell people what they want to tell them, rather than understanding what people want to be told and need to be told. We've got the fatal five, which is quite fatal four, fatal five, quite arbitrary. You go in, you talk to me about drugs and driving. I mean, I've always thought I would be super efficient on cocaine. I would get so much done, like make more film and products. But I'm never going to do cocaine. It's not raised that way. It's not something that I'm ever going to do. But people will talk to you about it. I always wear a seatbelt. People will talk. But the things that perhaps I might be more likely to do, drive maybe a little bit fatigued and things. These are the things that perhaps resonate and more receptive to. So I think we've got to understand, and this is really where driving instructors come in, because I think you have these pinch points. If you look at the Venn diagram of where people might be interested in road safety, it's when they're in a pinch point. So they're in a journey, like the learning to drive process, and there's a moment of high relevance. So at that point, they're paying good money to learn how to be a good driver, or to pass the test or whatever. But they're receptive to information at that point. And then a lot of the time we try and tell people things that they're perhaps not interested in at that moment, or can't do anything about at that moment. And if you can't do anything about it, then what's to some degree. We know the forgetting curve is quite steep for some of this stuff. So talking to people about it a long time before they can actually action it might be better to talk about something that they can put into action.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I will just say that you're giving me the clickbait for the episode there, which is James Evans says he's more productive on cocaine. So
yeah, you can edit this however you.
Yeah.
However you
But I mean, just what you were saying there about instructors and how we can influence, I think that's a really key point. And the example I would use, I'd be interested in your thoughts on this actually, is if someone gets in the car, I always ask them how they are, and you get the odd one, "Oh, knackered, absolutely knackered. I couldn't sleep last night." So it's not they've been out, they're just tired. And my
Yeah.
question is always, should you be driving today? And there's always this look on their face that's like, and you can see it's almost like, well, everyone else will do. Why shouldn't I drive? But actually, maybe I shouldn't. And then that usually leads to quite an interesting discussion. And then they turn around and say, well, I didn't want to cancel because I worried that I'd lose my fee. And, that kind of, I'm saying,
Mm.
right, well, how about if you tell me that you're feeling knackered and you're a bit worried about the lesson, then we can decide what you're going to do. And that might say, well, how about I drive us to a car park that's empty and we can practice a Bay Park because it's a
Yeah.
less dangerous situation, or it might be let's look at the theory. And I always find that leads to a really interesting question, really interesting conversation. Do you think that is what you're referring to, and that's something where driving instructors can take a bit of a lead in those sort of situations?
100%. I mean, this is why you've hit the nail on the head completely. It's about, discussion. Driving instructors have just the most unique relationship and, touch point with everyone, coming through the learning to drive process, or practically everyone. And what you've described there is a key part of So the Honest Truth, which we took on when the charity closed in 2019. We kind of incubated through COVID, and it's now pushing forward again with Ollie Taylor, who's just come left the police after 30 years. He's come back into it, and you've got these 10 truths. I didn't make them up. We just inherited them, and fatigue is one of them. The idea is at the beginning of the lesson, you watch a 2-minute truth video about fatigue. Literally, while you're doing a bit of paperwork or they're just getting settled in the car, 2 minutes is nothing. And then for the rest of the session, that's your kind of topic to have a conversation about. I agree there. If you've noticed these signs of fatigue, the instructor can start, can kind of start sowing the seeds. Perhaps if it's, I don't know, bank holiday Monday or something like that, they've got a lesson and they've been out on the Sunday night. Maybe you're starting to see a little bit of hangover type stuff. You can introduce the idea of drink. If you're driving around and you have someone tailgating you can start to talk about, showing off, thrill seeking, speed, all of these sorts of things. Because, I mean, I don't know, but I'm guessing you see a lot of things out on the road with learners that would allow you to start a contextual discussion, overtaking a vulnerable road user, perhaps a cyclist, and, starting the conversation about whether they cycle. And, again, having those discussions is arguably more important than giving them a campaign or a linear piece of education, because you start to work out what their barriers and challenges might be to this. And they say, well, I'm a lifeguard, I'm locking up at 11:30 at night after everyone's gone back, so actually they're going to be driving at night a lot of the time. That's down to their lifestyle, and only really you're going to know that as a driving instructor.
I mean, to me, it's all about taking ownership, and it's something I have a lot of conversations with the learners about. It's if you're full of cold and you're really ill and your nose is running, your eyes are all swollen up, don't drive to work. Probably don't go to work in the first place, but don't drive to work. That you're the driver. You get to make these choices. And I mean, the example I often use is I used to work at McDonald's many, many moons ago, and the number of people that are, phoning sick when they weren't sick, just not turning to work because they want a day off. But then when it snowed and there was 6 foot of snow, they're driving and it'll take them for. I'm like, this is the day you phone in and claim your little sick day. Don't drive in and cry, And I think
Yeah.
that a lot of young people in particular are scared. And again, I wonder if you'd agree or disagree with this. I think a lot of people, young people in particular, are scared to take ownership because they may be worried about what other people will say. Because that older generation are often like, just do it, just drive to work. I've been doing this for 30 years and no one's ever gone wrong. So I'm just wondering if that's something you see, that almost peer pressure around that.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think there's a lot of unhelpful social norms kind of perpetuated by parents' generations, as well as peer pressure from people their own age. But we know the frontal lobe doesn't fully develop, especially in young males, until mid-20s. And that's the bit that's responsible for, emotion regulation, risk management, all of this sort of stuff. So we know there's going to be peer pressure. But I think when parents come through, and I don't know how you find this from an instructor point of view, you would think your most prized asset, the thing that you would do anything, the person you would do anything for, you say, well, we want to try and get you through your test as quickly as possible because that's some sort of stamp of kudos, and we're going to put you in an old banger because that's kind of what we had, and that's what we had because that's all that was available. But now we've got cars with AEB that have got great ADAS features for $7,000. It might not be the Clio or the Corsa that you want. It might be the Hyundai i20 or whatever that you don't want. But parents, I think could do a lot more. Perhaps don't go to Orlando this year and spend $10,000 on the first car rather than $2,000, and understand the purchasing decisions. Understand the benefits of telematics insurance. So I think actually the older generation, you're right, they can put behavioral pressure on, but they also have capital opportunities to make purchasing decisions, telematics insurance, safer first vehicle, all of these things. So we're going to pay for your driving lessons, but I want you to learn to drive over 9 months, and I'm going to get private practice insurance. I'm going to take you out, every week. All of this stuff, empirical evidence says, makes young drivers exponentially safer. And parents who probably should, want to do it, perhaps don't all want to do it. And I don't know why. I've never really got very close to an answer on that.
I'll happily give you my take on that. And I think that I've worked with some amazing parents, genuinely, that are they don't care about anything other than, I don't want my kids to be involved in a collision after they pass a test. And they're interactive and they're brilliant. But then there are others. And I think this is, from my experience, this is the biggest problem, is because they've never had a problem. So, and it seems easy to them. What they don't see is everyone swerving out of their way while they're driving. They don't necessarily see all the near misses. They just see the fact that they haven't had a problem. And if they haven't had a problem for 40 years, then we're just conning them out of money, creating these imaginary problems. So I think that's my take on it. But I want to steer the conversation back slightly to instructors for a second, because we're talking about why potentially instructors don't engage with road safety campaigns as much as perhaps, well, I'm sure as you'd like, and definitely as much as I'd like them to. And I think there's an element there of, because I used to be a little bit like this. This is me holding my hands up, in that I'm a trained driving instructor. I know all the road safety stuff. I'll just teach you that road safety stuff. But I also wonder if there's an element of what road safety campaign is worthwhile, because there's a lot of organizations, there's charities, there's different campaigns. You mentioned The Honest Truth, there's Project Edward, my mind's gone blank, Break, there's Young Drivers, there's Fresh Drivers UK, there's all this stuff. Yeah. And I just wonder if that's maybe a concern. Is there too many differences, if that makes sense?
Yeah, I know what you mean. There's a lot of very disparate agencies delivering road safety for one reason or another. And then there's a lot of different campaigns and different ways of doing it. So consequently, you get a very fragmented, sort of landscape. I mean, that can be good because you can pick and pack stuff. I mean, I think a lot of it is timing. So, we know the Dr. Robert Isler research in Waikato University suggested that you can improve development of the frontal lobe in relation to eye scanning if you do a certain amount of hazard perception and hazard prediction training. And actually, if you could start that at 15, that would be great. So actually, pre-driver stuff, there's very limited evidence to suggest that putting anyone in a car pre-test is helpful. In fact, a bit like the skid pan stuff, there's some evidence that shows, that it's not good, because it actually means that they can pass the practical test quicker when they turn 17. And actually, that's not good for road safety. Actually, slowing that process down is proven to be more effective. So I think it's about, choosing what to do at what time. There's no point really talking too much about car maintenance until you actually have your first car and you can walk out there and you can start to look under the hood, look at the tires. So I think a bit of it is timing. Things like The Honest Truth, we wanted that to be unobtrusive. So the idea is that apart from watching a 2-minute truth video in 10 lessons, the rest of it is discussion based and discussion while you're driving around. So some of these things require time, additional time with an instructor, additional money. That's not something that the mass market's going to stomach. So that's why we didn't want to do that with THT. Some stuff is just too light touch. it's a campaign video or something that someone's supposed to read. But, there's very limited evidence that those things are effective. So I totally get, it's very fragmented. In some ways, that's good because you can pick and pack what you need. But that's the idea of THT. Honest Truth was designed for instructors who wanted to deliver road safety, to make it easier. We weren't trying to teach instructors how to deliver road safety. We were trying to say, you're busy enough. You have enough going on. Let us make it easy for you by providing an audit trail and providing the content. And if legislation changes or data changes, that's our problem. We'll deal with that. We'll give you the materials. You just do the delivery. You put it on the website as a USP, and in theory, everyone's happy. The great thing at the moment is ADIs are busy. They've been able to raise their prices, which I think is important. I think traditionally ADIs were quite underpaid in relation to, the outgoings that they have, car maintenance, fuel, the expertise, the training that they have to do. You go and have a sports massage, you think nothing of spending 40, 45 quid an hour, and all they've got's a bloody table. And usually it's, it's in your house. So, to go in someone else's car for an hour and get this, access to, such enormous freedom and opportunity. But again, that's an easy thing to say if you've got money. If you haven't got money, you've got supportive parents or family, then obviously that cost is a huge barrier to learning to drive. So yeah, that would be my take on it. I totally agree. Landscape very fragmented for sure.
I think one of the things that I do is I'm a big fan in resources, and I use this podcast as an example. So, or podcasts, I should say, that there's a growing number of driving instructor podcasts now. And I think that's great because people can pick and choose. I've said from day one of doing this podcast, I've always promoted the other podcasts.
Yeah, great.
If someone doesn't like my voice, they can go and listen to the other one and they can still develop and still learn from that. So I think possibly there's a danger of oversaturation, but I mean, from my experience, the thing that I cottoned onto, because everyone is going to be able to latch onto something, mine was Project Edward. And it was just that phrase, every day without road death. And it was because I'd seen a comment by someone saying, this is not a realistic target or something like that. And that struck me as, why shouldn't it be the target? And I latched onto that because of that. And I just think for anyone listening, go and find one that works for you. And that's a really good starting point, and you can promote that, because I also think as you said, work is voluminous at the minute, but at some point that is going to dry up. And I think if you're a parent weighing up instructors and you look at one instructor and this instructor is saying, oh, this road safety campaign offers this, and we've got the Honest Truth, and we provide your young drivers with this, and Project Edward week of action here, and garage anxiety with fresh drive, and you're doing that, and the other instructor was saying, this person passed. I know which I'm going for.
Yes.
Yeah. And I think that as instructors, we miss a little bit of a trick there sometimes. But we mentioned the Honest Truth, and I just want to clarify one thing, because I'm crap with acronyms. That's what you're meaning when you say THT, right?
Absolutely, yeah, because it's such a mouthful. Yeah, THT, Honest Truth. No,
he's fine. I'm just useless with acronyms. I will hold my hands up. I'm not signed up to the Honest Truth. I will be by the end of today. I've been looking into it a lot over the last few weeks, and I've had 2 weeks off, and I've used those 2 weeks off as a bit of a reset in my driving school and going again almost. And part of that is going to be incorporating the Honest Truth. Fantastic. Part of the reason I haven't done it is because I think apathy. I think a little bit of laziness. But also because I provided other different resources. But the more I've looked into the Honest Truth, the more I'm like, this is actually really good. And I want to be a part of this, and I want to offer this. But rather than me saying that, I would like to give you the opportunity to tell us a little bit more about the Honest Truth, and why should driving instructors embrace this?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I can't take any credit for creating this. I mean, this came out of a terrible young driver collision in the southwest. It started with Ollie Taylor, Rob from the fire service, and Rebecca from the council. And they ran this very successfully for a few years. And then obviously resources in the public sector got stretched, and they had to go back into normal day jobs. So it set up a charity. They had a board. But I think it just struggled to get the funding that it needed to continue without any revenue coming from instructors. And, it wasn't closing the loop. It was sort of always looking for charity funding. And the charity closed in 2019. We took it on. It came into first car just with the idea that we could incubate it. I mean, so much work had been done. It seemed crazy to shut it all down, but we knew it wasn't quite functioning right. So what we did is we separated out. Some people remember the Animal Heads campaigns. That was very Marmite. Some people loved it. Some people hated it. We basically redid a lot of those and turned it into a campaigns element. And then we took the bit that driving instructors were supposed to deliver and made that its own intervention. We put a price tag on it. I think it was 100 quid a year. And you've got 50 young drivers guides, which we used to sell in Smiths for $4.99. You've got 50 parent guides. You've got My Car, My Rules cards, which you could give your learners when they pass to basically set their own rules for the car, put them on the dashboard. Ollie will tell you a good story about how that came to be. At some point, if you ever get him on a podcast, he's a good guy to chat to about that. And obviously, the truth pack with the 10 truths. So historically, the learners would basically read a double-page spread, take them a couple of minutes. These are now becoming 2-minute truth videos, and the whole thing's being digitized to be on an app, which Dan Hill is nearly finished, and that will launch, in the summer to make it a bit easier. But the idea is exactly what you said at the start of the podcast: is that you can pick a theme out of the 10, which maybe vulnerable road users, drink, drugs, distraction, mobile phones, seatbelts, speed, showing off, whatever it happens to be. Pick a truth, and then frame that as a discussion for the rest of the session. At the end of the session, once you've discussed it, signed it off. Once they've done all 10 truths, they become a THC graduate, and then we'll hopefully give them some good rewards as time goes on. But as with all of this stuff, you need a critical mass of people coming through to get the people who give the rewards enough of an incentive to offer them. So it's a bit chicken and egg. But I think you make a good point. You've sort of sat at the periphery and you've looked around it, and I think a lot of people have, because it's not really reached maturity yet. And I think this is some of the things with road safety campaigns, is everyone expects it to be Silicon Valley complete, out of the box. And I don't mind admitting it's a lot of work, a lot of investment to get it working right, and build the curriculum around it, structure around it, content around it. And even now, 4 years on, understanding that paper doesn't work because you can't have an audit trail with paper, you have to digitize, so doing the digital bit, and having Ollie back, having the resource to be able to kind of promote this effectively. In COVID, it was great. Instructors were so engaged with THT. And then as soon as they go back, they're rightly earning all the money that they didn't earn during COVID. And so THT's taken a back seat, and it's harder to recruit people, even in areas where we've got funding. So Kent have paid for 100 instructors to do this for free. Warwickshire 75, Norfolk 25, Staffordshire 20. So actually road safety teams are funding a lot of this. But even then, sometimes it's hard to get instructors to devote the time and the focus to it. But it is, unlike some of the other campaigns which do require additional hours online or in car, THD is very much integrated within driving lessons. You shouldn't necessarily even know that that you've received it. It's just part of what the instructor that you learned with did.
The instructors that have signed up and that have used it, what sort of feedback have you got from them?
Yeah, I mean, this is this is an interesting point, because it's all paper. We don't really know how they're using it, what cadence they're delivering the truths, whether they're doing it at the start of the lesson, at the end of the lesson. The feedback from the ADIs who are vocal and the ones that are super engaged is always very, very positive. But I think because it's offline, because it's analog, it's quite difficult. You've got loyalty card style things for each learner to check off each truth that they've done with a signature. Obviously, you've got to then put them in an elastic band, keep them in the car, keep the truth pack in the car. It's it's perhaps not the slickest experience at the moment, which when we have the app, and obviously you can use that to manage the learners, not to the nth degree. I know a lot of people use these tools anyway, but just to kind of keep track of their progress through. And then you could just give them the phone or the iPad to watch the 2-minute truth. Hopefully we'll just have a lot more outputs that we can see learners coming through, rather than just hoping that this is being delivered. I always work off the rule of fifths. So I always think a fifth of people, 20% of people in life will just hate you. It doesn't really matter what you do. They just won't like you. And then 20% of people will love you no matter what you do. And then there's, about 60% in the middle that you can sort of win over depending on, what you do. I'm not worried about the 20% that will never go for this. and the 20% that love it are probably doing it at the moment. It's just it's that 60% in the middle. We've got to do something that works for them as instructors, that doesn't take too much time, too much focus, too much energy, gives them the satisfaction of knowing that they're, giving their learners the best chance of staying safe, in addition to the skill stuff and the knowledge stuff that they teach. This is more attitudinal stuff that perhaps I would say instructors, some instructors will be good at delivering this, but not everyone's good at necessarily prompting conversations. Let THT do that, conversation prompting. You guys have the conversation, tick them off, and at volume that could make a big impact to how how people drive potentially.
Oh no, I love that, and I think I was interested. I was having a conversation about this on the podcast I recorded yesterday. Persuasion Mountain. You're at the top of the mountain. Some people have bought into on the other side. The others are climbing up the hill that you can talk to. There's a few further down that are looking over their shoulder at you. Then there's ones for everywhere that you ignore. And I think it's an interesting way of looking at it. But I can't decide whether to come at you as devil's advocate or my honest thoughts. I think I might do both. So I am a big believer in paying for stuff and embracing stuff, and I think that we are ridiculously lucky in the industry we're in. You mentioned Dan Hill there, apps like My Drive Time and Go Roadie that we can get for 10 or 12 quid that are phenomenal resource for driving instructors. We've got training programs like client-centered learning and the instructor premium. So plug myself for a second. We've got associations and we've got the driving instructor and all this stuff that we get for like tenner a month. A lot of it is priced at. That's like ridiculously good value. And if you look at the honest truth, I think that is it £98 for a year? Am I right?
Yeah, exactly. But that's largely because it includes, the physical magazines, and of course they've got a big cost to them, and the postage is even 10 quid on that. We have to take that off because a lot of instructors obviously aren't that registered. We are, so actually the net to us isn't 98 quid. It's more like 74, and then you take the £10 postage, 64, you take the magazine costs off. So actually it starts to look a little bit slimmer after that.
Even for us as instructors, that's still less than a tenner a month. I think that £8.20 a month would work out as if we worked it out like that. So I think that we're ridiculously lucky that they get access to this stuff. However, putting the devil's advocate spin on it, why should we have to pay for stuff that's road safety? Why are you just giving this for free, James?
Well, that's a really good point, and that's what we are trying to do. So my long-term goal for this is once you can prove effectiveness. Well, first thing I'll say is that I think driving instructors have been an underutilized resource for road safety teams for a long time. I think it's very well known that they go into schools, go into colleges, and traditionally deliver stuff to young drivers. But again, you go into a school and college, and there's some amazing interventions I've been involved in, but everyone's at a very different stage. Some people are 2 years away from learning to drive, or maybe won't learn to drive until after university. Some people are learning, some people have passed. And it's great to have those sorts of, where they do have those collective conversations together. I think the peer-to-peer education and discussion is actually very powerful. But I look at, how many road safety teams had relationships with driving instructors, and barely any, and of course you are the conduit, exactly what stage people are in the process as they come through. But I think it goes in the too hot to handle pile. Road safety teams are stretched. They haven't got the resources that they had 20, 30 years ago. So when you say, well, go out and make relationships with 150 driving instructors in the county, 100 driving instructors, it just can't be done. So this is where THT comes in. It makes it easy for road safety teams to fund interventions that are delivered by driving instructors. And we are doing that. So as I say, Kent's got 100, Warwickshire 75, Hillingdon 20. And if we can prove effectiveness, a big national agency, Highways or someone will come along and cut a huge check and say, right, we're going to make this free for every driving instructor who wants to deliver it. In the meantime, it's still quite siloed, but ultimately it's a USP. I tell you, I went and had a haircut the other day, which was desperately overdue, and I use an app called Nearcut for the guy. Before COVID, he was like, no, we don't want to use any technology. It's really nice. People come and sit on the sofa for 40 minutes and disconnect from the world. And I said, well, I'm a bit busy for that, but I used to give it a go. And then in COVID, he got this app, and now you can, book it well ahead of time. They send reminders and things. And I asked him actually when I was having my haircut, I said, how much do you pay a month for it? And all you really do, you don't even pay through the app. You just basically book a slot with a hairdresser. He said, I pay £130 a month for it, and he still thinks that is the last bargain left on earth. Completely revolutionised his business. And then I look at my drive time and things, and similar apps and stuff that you guys pay for that is can be almost the backbone of the CMS of running your business. And I still can't believe that it is that. I mean, I pay for Adobe, I pay for IOD membership, I pay for so many things, hundreds and hundreds of pounds a month to run the business with different Canva and all of these tools that you need. You've got to keep a check on them. But compared to 20 years ago when you were buying CDs and things were going out of date, you buy the next version. Actually, the software as a service aspect is, a way of doing things is really good. And actually, these things are, I think, ADIs. If they probably might know, other things that are similar but more expensive. I think it's the last bargain left on earth. I really do. But if it gives you a differentiator, if Honest Truth gives you a differentiator that you can put on your website, says we invest in, giving, safe driving for life sort of skills, attitudinal coaching and stuff throughout the lessons, then yeah, I mean that's great. It's a differentiator. It's a USP. You get the car sticker. You get the magazines which go into the home, and then the parents. It's a value add. It's a value add. And even if only 20% of instructors would do it, I mean, even if you only had 2,000 instructors seeing 40 a year, that's 100,000. So that's well over 10% of all learners that come through. We don't need to have 40% of ADIs or 50% of ADIs. We just need to have the ones that think it's important enough to pay a little bit for. And I'd be so happy with that.
Well, as of yesterday, a little exclusive for you and the listeners here. As of yesterday, I hit my target, which I set 2 years ago when I first started, of getting 10% of the industry listening. And I hit that
congratulations.
target. So hopefully, I get 10% increase as a result of this. You never know. I'm fascinated by the fact that your hairdresser is now more technologically more advanced than a lot of driving instructors. I think that says a lot. Greg, I think it's time to ask you the most important question, and that is, which song are you going to be adding to my Instructor Podcast Spotify playlist?
Well, I'm going to say, I bet this is already on there, but I think Mr. Brightside by The Killers would have to be mine.
Listen, it's not on there. And I've been waiting for many a week for someone to say that, and I've just made my day. I do not care about this conversation. I care about that song. Thank you for choosing that song.
Great. Great idea to do a playlist for sure. Brilliant.
Right. Do you want to just tell all my listeners where they can find you? Where's the best place to find you, or The Honest Truth, or anything else you might want to offer?
Yeah, sure. So honesttruth.co.uk, obviously firstcarmedia.co.uk is what we do. We produce the magazines people get with their theory test, their driving test. You can, I don't really do social media, but I think I'm on LinkedIn. The James Evans is a super common name. In fact, there's another lifeboat crew member on my station called James Evans. So yeah, the James Evans is on LinkedIn. But always feel free to drop me an email, james@firstcar.co.uk. I'll always come back to you. I just want to say thanks to you for having me, and thanks to all your listeners. I know, the driving instructor industry is often underregarded and undervalued, and I think you guys do an incredible job, and I'm glad to see the backlog in some senses you're starting to get some recognition and some airtime, and to be paid properly for it. So really good.
Awesome. Well, really appreciate you joining us today. It's very much appreciated.
Take care, Darren. Thanks.
And we'll be back with the second half of this show in just a second with Sophie Bailey from Fresh Drivers UK. But just before we do, I'm just taking a brief pause to give a special shout out to the latest couple of sign-ups for the Instructor Podcast Premium. And they are Wazim Akram and I'm going to apologise in advance for this because I'm going to butcher this name, but I'll try my best. Aristaminis Charitos. That's what I'm going with, and hopefully I haven't offended anyone. So big thank you to those guys for signing up to the Instructor Podcast. They immediately get access to over 100 online trainings for a variety of audio, video, and written content, including things around the standards check and coaching and mindfulness with some wonderful people like Kev Tracey Field, Bob Morton, and Harper. And if you would like to get access to all that content, you can sign up as well for as little as £10 a month. just head over to www.theinstructorpodcast.com or head to the show notes. You can find a direct link over there. For £10 a month, you get all that awesome stuff, as well as some exclusive discounts with places like Client-Centered Learning, the ADI PDI Doctor, the Guild of Mindful Drivers, and Go Roadie. And if you wanted to upgrade your CPD to a whole other level, you can sign up to the higher tier, what I call the interactive tier, where for £22 a month, you get everything that's in the £10 a month subscription. Plus, you get a lot of interactive goodness. So you get to join me on some shows, watch them being recorded, possibly even interact. You get access to the live expert session presentations. We've had two so far from Chris Benstead and Kev and Tracey Field, and we've got one coming up very soon with Dave Shannon, all about tax. And you also get access to regular problem solver sessions where I open up my Zoom room and people can come in with their problems and we can solve them together. As I said, the best place to find that is www.theinstructorpodcast.com. And now on the Instructor Podcast, we are joined by the ever wonderful Sophie Bailey. How are we doing?
I'm good. How are you?
All the better for seeing your smiley face, definitely. Thank you for joining us today. It's great to have you on. And I'm going to kick off the show with the same way that I kick off every show, which is that I speak to leaders, experts, innovators, and game changers. That's a tagline for the show. So I'm just wondering which one or ones of those you would consider yourself: leader, expert, innovator, game changer.
It's quite a difficult one for me to answer, but I would say a game changer because I'm trying to make a change, I guess.
What are you trying to make a change in?
Trying to change the mindsets of new and young drivers so they don't necessarily follow suit of the people that may have influenced them in the first place. So like parent, carer, guardian, big brother, big sister kind of thing. There could have been different things that they've done whilst learning to drive or driving. And I kind of want to change it so that they make their own decisions and give them a better start to driving.
I think that kind of brings us to the first question I want to ask you, which was from speaking to you and from seeing your stuff online, I came across the phrase garage anxiety.
Yeah.
And I've never heard that before. So talk to me about garage anxiety. What do you mean by that?
So garage anxiety is something that we see on a daily basis. It's not necessarily just new or young drivers. It's kind of drivers who have maybe been driving for the past 10 years. But I think since the pandemic, it's a lot more visual now. People obviously are a lot more aware of what the different mental illnesses are, because obviously during the pandemic, we all kind of became aware of different mental illnesses. So it's not necessarily a mental illness. It is more a fact of, if you have anxiety, it's slightly, it's more of an environment where it's going to be more heightened, if you know what I mean. So let's say you've just passed your driving test and you've been driving for 3 months. So you're kind of getting a bit confident and you get a flat tire. And in your head, you're thinking, oh my God, passed my driving test, but I have no idea what I'm supposed to be doing. What do I do? I've got a flat tire. It's stuck on my drive. And then it's like panic sets in. They're a bit like, oh, So what I'm trying to change is the fact that they would know what to do. So when my website's eventually launched, they would be able to just kind of go onto the website and it says flat tire, click on that one. Oh, this is what I need to do. And it'll say like, call a recovery company, or call your local garage to see if they do a call out, or have you got breakdown, blah, blah, blah. So I think the garage anxiety is like the fear of the unknown, because they have this perception. Unfortunately, in the motor trade, we have a perception that we are kind of like the con men and that we're just going to rip everybody off what we do. But realistically, most independent garages like ours, we're just working for a living and to keep our family business going. And that's what most independent garages do. So we are trying to keep our community safe at the same time. So I think we're just trying to change the perception of the garages and also stop the fear of the unknown, because if somebody has a flat tire, it's so easy to be fixed and it literally takes half an hour. So I just kind of want to raise the awareness to them that it's something they don't need to worry about, and they don't need to keep driving on it, or go to a petrol station and put air in it, and it might go down again half an hour later and still be driving on it, because obviously anything could happen. So it's just a case of basically trying to stop these different things, and also trying to stop them from turning the music up when they hear a noise in the car, because they don't know what they need to do and they think it's going to be expensive, because most of the time a noise in a car isn't expensive, but it's expensive when you've turned your music up and you've carried on driving around on it for 6 months.
Is that a genuine thing that people do?
Oh, I have done it. So yeah, it's a genuine thing. But I think I should probably say that, but before I was kind of involved with the business, I did something completely different. So for me, I was just, oh my God, I have to go and ask my dad to fix the car. Oh my God, it's going to go mad. So I think just turning the music up, you're a bit like, oh, I don't need to hear it today. I'll just deal with that tomorrow. But then obviously that then gets pushed down weeks and weeks and weeks. And we always get a customer that will come in and say, it did start about 6 months ago. So it could be something, it could have just been like a track end that's gone, or it could be the ball joint that's gone. But because they've carried on driving around on it, the suspension's been even more compromised. So then there's more components of the vehicle that's actually now needs replacing. So therefore it's more expensive. So, yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of stuff I want to touch back on there, but I think the first one is, I like the fact that you're kind of honest about that and saying it's something that you did, because I think that's the sort of stuff that relates to people.
Yeah.
I found that on this podcast, if there are times I come on and I can't help myself, I'm a little bit preachy at times, but that resonates as much as when I say I had this problem, this is what I struggled with, this is how I overcome it. So I think that taking that approach is awesome. But also you were talking about the perception that the public has of garages, and it's like, I think a lot of us instructors will have an affinity with that, because there's a similar thing with us. I'm reading a shouldn't do it to myself, but I read a post online this morning on Facebook, and just there's an article, and the public were commenting, and there's so much negativity towards driving instructors. How dare you charge this much? And only took me 10 hours when I passed 42 years ago, and I've only crashed 17 times, so whatever. And how can we change that perception, do you think? Not just of instructors, but of garage as well. What can we do to change that?
I don't really know. I always say it's about better information, and things like that. But I do think there's always going to be negativity. You can never change it, because you could be in the group of, let's say, 50 instructors who do the best for what they charge. They literally give anything and everything. And those students that learn to drive with these instructors become the best drivers, and they've really got what they want for the money. But then there's probably still sometimes an instructor there who charges, say, I don't know how much you charge, but I don't know what the going rate is now. But let's say they charge whatever amount, and they give the minimal amount, and they're kind of a bit grumpy, and they're not giving the customer or the driver a lot back for the money. So then that person will tell 10 people who about that negative experience, and then those people will be like, oh, John had a really bad experience with that person. Then they'll tell another 10 people. But when you do something good and you are a good instructor, then you find that the person that has enjoyed the experience will only tell about 2 to 3 people, and they'll only tell about 2 to 3 people. So it's just the way the world works, because we find that we can go above and beyond for our customers, like we always do anyway. And we'll get, say, 5 people off the back of that. I said, oh, my neighbour said that you did this for them, so I've come to get this done, and blah, blah, blah. But then sometimes you'll get a customer who has had a bad experience purely because they've kind of misunderstood something, or they think that the price should have been cheaper because it got quoted cheap elsewhere and things like that. But then they'll tell like another 10 people about this. So then it's just, yeah, I don't know how you could change it, because unfortunately we're a very negative human race, aren't we? A very
No, I agree wholeheartedly with everything you've said, but I also think that you're going a long way to change that perception of garages with what you're doing publicly. And I think that's all we can do. I'm also a big believer in making the change ourselves. So it's something I've done. I remember when I started doing it, but like you said about the telling the 10 people about a negative experience, but 2 about the positive. I'm swapping that round for
Yeah.
the way I work now. I mean, I had someone deliver some furniture yesterday, and they were awesome. They were really helpful, super polite, super friendly, and I'm like, they don't need to be like this. This is them just being really good at their job. Where can I leave you a review? And I went on, as soon as I left, I've gone and left them that positive review. And I think that we can change the way we are. But as I said, you doing what you doing, it's got to bring some positivity towards it. And you know, as you say, you're not ever going to change anyone, but you could change one person's opinion.
Yeah.
And that then has quite a big effect in itself. But I want to touch back to the garage anxiety thing for a sec, because it is something that
Yeah.
fascinates me, because I know there will be people that listen to this or that will read your posts and that will read the word A, anxiety, but then B, garage anxiety, and immediately starts tutting and starts thinking about, you know, man up or pull yourself together. What would you say to those people?
I'd probably say come and work for me for a day and see what we actually see, because I mean, most of the time the people who are like that think they know everything. And I don't mean to sound like I'm being a cow, but most of the time they are the people who are DIY mechanics as well. And they do it off YouTube, and they've changed brake pads years ago, so they know what they're doing. But they're usually the ones that make mistakes as well. So I think that garage anxiety comes from a lot of conflicting stuff, and it is mainly from this trade, because every Tom, Dick, and Harry thinks that they know about brakes and they know about tyres and they know how to fix an engine. But realistically, engines are only becoming more and more complicated now. So, do you really know what you're doing? And then I think when people are brought up around that mentality, they kind of feel more pressure when they go to a garage, because I think they might go home and a parent, carer, guardian, whatever, would say, well, how much did they charge you? Because they shouldn't have been charging that, because I looked online and this should have been this and this should have been this. So then they feel more of like oh, I've gone and done that myself today. And I thought, I've used the garage that has got good reviews, has got, they could do their research. They could find a garage that's got really good reviews, that has different schemes put in place, like say they were a Fresh Drivers UK garage. They could be a Foxy Lady approved garage, which is very similar to Fresh Drivers UK, but it's all like for women. They could have all the different affiliations and be an amazing garage, and they've got a good price. They've been looked after very well. But then I think sometimes it's maybe the pressure that when they go home, to all tell the friends or something, they'd be like, oh, I went to that garage down the road and I got a part one. You've been ripped off with that for a brand new tyre. So I think that also is a massive factor in it. I've probably just gone off on a tangent, but these are the different factors to what actually causes garage anxiety. And I think to the people who say it's a load of crap, then do you get your tyres checked and do you actually look after your vehicle? Because if you do, I'd love to know how much you know about cars.
I also find often those people are the ones that kick up a bigger fuss than the people that actually have the anxiety, which
Yeah.
always makes me chuckle. But again, the parallel there with what you're talking about of, someone going to a garage, coming home, telling their parents what the garage has said, and their parents almost kicking off a little bit. Same for us instructors.
Yeah.
What have you done in your lesson today? Oh, well, you shouldn't have done this. Again, the article I was reading this morning, there was one comment in particular, and this is coming way off topic. You mentioned tangents. I'm going way off topic now, but there's one comment in particular that said, my son's supposed to have an hour lesson, but he spends the first 5 minutes of every lesson talking to his instructor. I think this is a rip-off. I'm like, what do you want the instructor to do? Just get in car and say drive? So it's the parallel with what you're saying from garages and us, I think is really interesting. But I think you also mentioned about sort of women, the Foxy Ladies approved garages and women drivers. And I'd be interested in your take on this, because I've got quite an interesting experience with this in that I know very little about the mechanics of running a car. I know what I need to know to get by, and that's it. I have no interest in it. I
Yeah.
enjoy driving, but I don't necessarily enjoy cars. But my ex is a complete car nut. So we used to go to the garage for summer, and the guy at the garage would often talk to me and ignore her.
Yeah.
And then she'd start responding back, and you could see he's slowly twisting so that he's facing her. And then eventually the conversation finished that way. And it always made me chuckle. So from my experiences, where I genuinely do feel a bit anxious about going to a garage, and this is me being honest now,
Yeah.
is that I know the person I speak to is almost expecting me to know what I'm talking about. And I have to go, no, I don't know what you're saying. Can you simplify that for
Yeah.
me, please? Whereas I'm guessing that when it comes to women, I'm stereotyping massively here, obviously, but for the purpose of this conversation, I
Yeah.
suppose women have the opposite to what I'm saying there, where they sometimes get treated like they're not going to know anything.
Yeah, I think we do. I mean, I do, and I work in a garage and I know about cars and mechanics. So I get treated like that by customers. And that's something I face on a daily basis. And I know more than they know, even though they don't believe me. But I think we have actually seen a massive turnaround now. So the Foxy Lady approved garage scheme was to basically make women feel safe in a garage, which is very similar to Fresh Drivers UK. And I was really good friends with Steph, who created it. Um, she's now doesn't have it anymore; somebody else has it. And it was to encourage more women to come into garages so that it wasn't just left to the husbands to deal with or the other partners, to say the right things for this. And or it wasn't left down to somebody else because they didn't feel comfortable. It was to encourage them to come into the garage. And I think we are very maybe different in our way of how we speak to customers because we don't expect them to know anything. But if a customer does know stuff about cars, then it's like, oh right, okay. So if a customer comes in and there's something wrong with the vehicle, we will always show them physically what is wrong. So let's say you came in with a flat tire, we will go and if the tire is irreparable, like I don't like coming to a customer and saying you've got a puncture, it needs repairing, because they could just be like, oh right, and then they could be thinking, well, how do I know? How do I know it just needs repair? It can't be repaired. How do I know that it could have been repaired? So we always make a point of saying, do you want to come and have a look at it? And then there's either me as my dad and there's all the great technicians that we've got will physically kind of show them what is wrong with the tire. So like, oh, you've got a nail and it's too close to the edge, so I'm not going to be able to repair it. This is why. I go and get you a price for a new tire and blah blah blah. Same with the mechanic. If a customer comes in and they say, oh, I think it's this, and my dad will say, oh, great, well, it gives us an idea of what it could be. Then we'll investigate and then we'll say, this is what has actually happened. This is what we've had to do. This is blah blah blah. And we always explain it to everybody. But if somebody has a knowledge of cars, it just means they can understand it a bit better, and we don't have to go into as much detail as we do, because, like you say, it isn't just men that know about cars. So many people know about cars, and some people don't have a clue. Like my mum and dad are a partnership in this company. My mum has completely no idea about anything with cars. She wouldn't even know how to check her tires. She wouldn't admit that, but she would not even know how to check her tires, and she does actually admit that. So I think what you're saying is what happened nowadays. People just assume that the males know about cars and that females have no idea, but realistically, most of the time nobody knows anything, or most of the time a lot of females know more about what the males know about. So yeah, it's like I get what you say. I don't even know if I just answered your question because I went off again, but you know what I was trying to say.
I think so. I find the whole thing fascinating, and like I say, I've had some great experience with garages, and just this last week I took mine in to get some bodywork repaired, and the guys were awesome. I told them straight out that you're going to have to simplify that for me. I'm like, okay, cool, and then they were right with me. So I
Yeah.
do think times are changing, but I just find it interesting, and I do think there is a justification for that anxiety, and I like the fact that there's people like you out there, because you're not just reaching out to young and new drivers and drivers. You're also going to be touching garages as well and wanting garages to improve best practice.
Yeah.
And I think that ties me into the next thing I was going to speak about, which is you mentioned that you obviously have the website coming up, which is going to have various resources that can people use, but you're all over the place at the minute. You were on Project Edwards event, you're doing stuff with I'm going to phrase this wrong, but Parliament, government, you're down at other road safety events.
Yeah.
So what are you doing to kind of reduce garage anxiety and bring that awareness about the stuff?
So I think for my 2023 year, I am building my personal brand as such. I want more people to know who I am, more people to understand that I am from a garage background, but I'm now branching into road safety to try and help. I want people to be familiar with me and be like, oh yeah, she does that. No, she does that. I know her. She does this. Blah blah blah. So that is what my plan is for 23. As for 2024, the way I want to help new drivers, young drivers, and garages and other companies is basically bring everybody together. So the website, when it's eventually, and I say eventually launched, or is down to funding at the moment, I'm wanting to create basically like a hub of information which could connect to a group of like driving instructors who maybe work closely with me and they're in different areas, and then say all the garages across the UK. I've already got 30 at the moment, I think, but I couldn't name them off the top of my head. Just because I can't think straight when I'm doing things like this. And it would be a directory, so like a young or new driver, or even maybe somebody who isn't comfortable in a garage. They don't have to be a fresh driver. They could just maybe have garage anxiety and think, I want to go somewhere that I know I can trust. Then the garage anxiety, the garage directory will have a postcode lookup part of it, which is the thing that's costing me the most. And then it would give them the garages in their area who have taken the Fresh Drivers UK pledge, who have started to work closely with me, and have said that they will give the best service to their customers, not take advantage, and also not judge on lack of knowledge, but take pride in educating, which is what we basically do. So that's how the garage directory will work. And then also working with like insurance companies, dash cam companies, telematics insurance and things like that, just basically trying to give somebody who's about to start driving the understanding of what the basics they need, and then also what they need to carry on their journey of driving to keep them safe throughout the whole time they drive. So tire information, mechanical information, just the basics, and also giving them connections to different companies that might benefit them. So there's something that's going to be launched in July. I think it's already known about at the moment, but in July it's called The Honest Truth. And that basically is the benefit of driving instructors as well, and people who are learning to drive. And there's different things that they learn about. I can't give you all the information because I don't fully know. But then there's like companies like First Car, Tire Safe, like I've already said. There's just, I kind of forgot what I'm talking about, so I'll start again.
I'm interested that you mentioned The Honest Truth there, because I didn't tell you this actually, but this podcast episode is split in two. The first half is with James Evans from The Honest Truth, and then the second half is with you from Fresh Drivers. So there you go. It's worked out quite well. I love what you're doing. I like things, and part of a big thing around this podcast and the instructor as a whole is finding people maybe taking a different approach and a fresh approach, excuse the pun, and something new. And I love what you're doing. I love the stuff you're doing on social media. I love the stuff you've got coming up, and it just feels a bit different to everything else. One of the things I mentioned on James Evans, I mentioned then, was sometimes it can feel like there's a lot of different road charities, organizations, campaigns, and it's like, which do we follow? Because obviously they're all important, and it can feel a bit, excuse the pun again, tiresome. But I think that with you, it is a little bit different because you're quite clear with the aspect of road safety you're championing. Now, obviously, promote it all, but there's a sort of that specific niche around tire safety and as we mentioned, garage anxiety. So I love that you're doing all that, but I wanted to ask sort of specifically in driving instructors, what could we do? Because we've got another great resource in you now. We can direct people to your social media and obviously in time your website and stuff like that. But is there anything you think that we could be doing with our learners to get them ready for after?
Well, there's something I want to put in place with Fresh Drivers UK, and that is that any garage that becomes Fresh Drivers UK approved actually hosts an event for the driving instructors in their area, so that they could bring their students whether they have like 1, 2, 10, to an event which would just be hosted on like an evening, and it would give them the basics of how to change a tire if they needed to, how to check the oil and water like the correct way, and basically just the basics of a vehicle, so that then they feel they have been welcomed into a garage environment. So then they've got a familiar face already. So say I asked a group of driving instructors from Morecambe to come into my garage and do it. They already, the students then would say, recognise me and my dad if they was to ever come back again. So they would feel more at ease. So I think one thing I'm trying to encourage is that driving instructors maybe say partner with the garage, not partner, so I'm not trying to say that they've got to just stick to that one garage, but maybe have a few garages in their mind that they think, do you know what, if my young drivers to ever need to go anywhere, that would be where I would send them. And then basically help them with that even maybe, I know it's taken a lot of time out of things, so it's how it would work, but it's basically maybe giving them an idea of what to say in a garage. So if I can help driving instructors in that way, then that, give them the information of what they could give to a younger driver, of what they need to when they go into a garage, give them the information, or even just taking them to a garage for a quick 5 minutes, walk into the reception, this is where you would come to, that's who you would speak to, let's get back on the road. So it's just all the basics of what they would need to know once they've passed the test, because once they've left the car with one of you guys, they're a bit like, oh my god, what do I do now? So it's more like helping them more, because if they know and feel confident, then you're going to get a better driver, aren't you? So I'm trying to encourage them to be welcomed into the garage environment, so hosting events like that through the garages, which is what they get when they basically sign up with Fresh Drivers UK. They get an event, so I'm trying to push these events so that the younger drivers are welcomed into the garage. They've got a familiar environment and they have a familiar face, because that always puts you at ease. You feel more comfortable where you're going.
I like those ideas. Well, I like the garage idea of the event you try to create, but in particular, what we can do, because when I first become an instructor, I was very set in my ways. I was old school, like, right, we do this and we do this and we do this and that's it. But I've evolved as we've gone along. And it's like, now I'll ask my students, do you want to go put petrol in car? Do you want to go multi-story car park? They almost always say yeah. And it still takes me by surprise a little bit. It's the parents that often moan about that, but they want to do it so that when they pass a test, they know how to put petrol in a car.
Sorry, I cut over what you said. I think that's really good, because I had the most amazing driving instructor. He was friends with my dad, and he was just ace. Like I did have like 96 lessons, because I failed my theory test like 6 times. So like we spent a lot of time together. But he was just ace. Just like when he said about the parents being a bit off about speaking to him for 5 minutes, me and Lloydie used to sit and talk to each other for at least 10 minutes before we started, and he would talk me through everything we were going to do today. Then he would tell me about where we're going to go, and is there anything I felt uncomfortable with? Is there anything I want to go over today? Is there anything I want to learn? And he was just so thorough with everything. He was just so good. And I think for me, to not speak to your driving instructor would be really like awkward almost, because then I'd feel like if I didn't have that 5 minutes at the start of a lesson, I wouldn't feel comfortable speaking to them at the end, because then again, that's like an anxiety, isn't it? You feel like, oh, I know I just want to get out of the car. So I think the fact that you ask them, do they want to go and put petrol in? Do they want to go and do that? I think that's really good, because that's something that my mum and dad took me to do. But sometimes younger people don't necessarily always have somebody that's that supportive, or they could be in the care, there could be anything. There's different situations, isn't there? So the fact that you give them that opportunity, I think that's amazing. I think that's really good. So well done to you for that.
Thank you. I wasn't expecting compliments today, but I've got one, so that's good. The other thing I was just going to tag on to that was that I can include garages into that. That's something I can think about going forward. I'll ask if they want to do this, this, and this. Do you want to go and pay a visit to a garage? I don't have to force it upon them. I can give them the choice, as you said. So that's something for me to think about. The other thing I was going to put to you around that was just, so I don't know if you're aware of this, but on the driving test, they have what they call show me, tell me questions. And some of them are around like the tires and, where you put oil and that kind of stuff. I still think a lot of instructors gloss over them really quickly, or just send them a YouTube video for the government website or whatever and say, watch this. Again, I liaise a lot with my students around that, and I've even get them to walk around the car now when they first come out of the car, say, "You're taking ownership of this car. Let's have a look around and see if you can see any." They all missed the dent inside of it for weeks when someone had bumped into me. So, I'm like, let's look again, shall we? Because I think you've missed something. But even I can be a bit more active and a bit more thorough with that stuff. So do you think that's potentially where we could also take a bit more ownership of going into a bit more detail on that stuff?
Yeah, definitely. I think so. Because I just think it gives you a better relationship with your driver as well. They feel like they're getting more for the money, I guess. I don't know. They feel maybe more like, oh my God, this driving instructor actually cares. He actually thinks that, is giving me the information that I need for afterwards. Because when I was at the Young Driver Focus the other week, there was a lady who was sat on the stage and she said, I pay my driving instructor to do that because I don't have the time to take my kids out in the car, which I completely understand. That the parents have such busy lives, they're just constantly trying to make money to keep everybody going. So I think the fact that you would do that in the lessons, I think that is really vital because it just sets them up better and it makes them feel more like they've actually got something out of it.
Okay, well, I'd really appreciate you coming on today. It's been a fascinating conversation, and I advise anyone listening to go and follow you on the socials. But speaking of which, do you want to just tell everyone where they can find you, where the best place is to go?
So I am on, I'm on Instagram, which is at Fresh Drivers UK. I'm on Twitter, which I think is at Fresh Drivers UK as well. Let me just double check. And I'm on LinkedIn as Sophie Bailey, but for some reason it comes up as Sophie B, and I can't change it. I don't know why it comes up like that. Yeah, my Twitter is at Fresh Drivers UK, and I even have a blue tick. Defo don't pay for that. So I'm on Twitter, Instagram, and LinkedIn. And my email address is on there as well. So if anybody listening wants to collaborate with anything, thinks that maybe there's something they could do to help me, then drop me an email. We can work something out. Can I also plug my event in October? So I am also hosting a road safety family fun day in October at the Morecambe Football Ground. It's the 22nd of October and it starts at 11 a.m. and finishes at 4 p.m. I've partnered up with Racing for Road Safety, which is owned by Ollie Stanways. He works for Westco Tech. And he basically races for road safety. So he's an amateur racing driver who races to campaign for road safety and younger new drivers. So we've partnered together to do an event in October, and we have the likes of the Lancashire Fire Service, we have the police, I've got lots of different companies who are around road safety and just general like roads, obviously, come in, and it's just all free. Nobody has to pay to come, nobody has to pay to exhibit, and it's just a fun day to give kids of information about road safety and keep it in the minds ready for winter, because obviously it'll be October, so we're going to do things about be seen and be safe, be seen, and different things. And if the weather's nice, I was going to potentially ask the fire service if they would do a teddy drop, but I might have to speak to them a bit nicely to do that, so we'll see.
On the good side. Am I right in thinking as well that you're going to be at the Intelligent Instructor Conference in October?
Yeah, I think I am. I'm in the middle of trying to organise it at the moment, because I'll need a team of people to come with me. So I have had a few people interested, which is really good. So I will properly announce that on my socials, probably in the next month. I'm at Goodwood next month, so I'll probably be a bit crazy then. But hopefully in the next month or so, I'll put something out. And confirm whether I definitely am. But hopefully I am. I want to be there so I can meet up everybody.
Well, I know lots of my listeners go, so they can check out you there. That sounds wrong. You know what I mean?
You are.
Yes. There you go. A new vibe to the Instructor Podcast. All right. So, do you want to finish off by telling us what your ultimate driving song will be, so I can add that to my Spotify playlist?
It might be a bit of might be a bit random to the others. I've not actually listened to the other ones, but it's Sarani, No Games. Do you know which song that is?
I have no idea.
I love reggae music and I love dancehall music, which is all like the crazy Jamaican dance music. That's like one of my favourite things. So Sarani No Games is one of I like to have a jig to it whilst I'm dancing.
Yeah, I often go to sleep to reggae music. I have no idea what it is, what it's called, or anything, but it helps me sleep. So there you go. But no, I'll get it added to the playlist so we can listen to that as we drive. And yeah, just a big thank you for joining us today. It's been awesome.
Yeah, thank you. Hopefully I've covered everything that you wanted to ask. And if I've kind of waffled, then I apologise, but that's my personality.
No, that makes two of us today, Dan. I do appreciate you coming on. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much.
So a big thank you to both James and Sophie there. Two really engaging conversations, I thought, and two conversations that made me reflect a little bit on how I handle road safety in the car. Because I think I mentioned it on the interview with James, in that I think I can be a bit, I don't know, whimsical at times. Maybe that's not the right word, but a bit, I'm a driving instructor. I know about road safety. I don't need to bring this other stuff in. But there's all these amazing resources out there that a lot of them are free, some of them you pay for, but they've got these amazing resources that we can share with our students. So, hopefully from these episodes, you can go and take away and pull at the threads of some of this stuff and get some useful information to pass on to your students. And the last thing that I would say around that is, use your social media channel to promote this stuff. You be the instructor that promotes Safe Driving for Life with Break, Project Edward, and The Honest Truth, and Fresh Drivers, and all these awesome companies. You promote these guys. You share these guys. That makes you stand out probably from about 90% of other driving instructors. That would be my big thing. It's what I'm going to be doing. It's what I've done today. So, I hope you found this episode useful. But remember, if you're not enjoying your lessons, you're doing them wrong.
The Instructor Podcast with Terry Cook, talking with leaders, innovators, experts and game changers about what drives them.